Now, people, particularly foreigners, in their newspapers say, we are an authoritarian lot. Because we are prepared to discipline ourselves. See, when you read newspapers, there's a style about writing articles as there is with clothes. The West sets the style. So every year they change to make you buy new clothes, throw away all your good old ones. They make the tie broader. They make the lapels broader. They make the trousers flared. They make the boys wear high heels with platforms. That's called the consumer society. Buy now, pay later. If you can't pay, never mind, borrow. Keep on borrowing, keep on paying. Some of these things we can't altogether avoid because we've got into that development track. So you see it in the cinemas, you see it on television, you see it in the magazines, the glossy pictures. But just sit back and think. That's meant for Americans whose per capita income is nearly $8,000 per person per annum. Going up, perhaps with the inflation, to $10,000 per capita per annum. Ours is not. We are just starting at a very low baseline. So just save. That's for the developed, wealthy, affluent. And now let me go to the other extreme. The poor. You've read about Bangladesh. Famine. Floods. Well, when we discipline ourselves, the Western journalists say authoritarian government. Dictatorial, no freedom. When Bangladesh gets into trouble, let me read to you the kind of sympathy they show Bangladesh. I'm reading from a very reputable newspaper called the London Times of the 14th of August. And they signed themselves. Now, Mr. Nicholas Ashford, he writes, Bangladesh lives continuously on the brink of disaster, and it is hardly surprising that many foreign aid officials have become fatalistic. Some believe Bangladesh can never become economically viable and will always have to be supported by massive injections of foreign assistance. Even optimists expect that the country will require sustained large-scale aid for many, many years. And self-sufficiency will only be possible if the high population growth rate can be curbed. See, when you can't put your house in order, they say, well, there you are. Hopeless case, non-viable. No, all the sympathy you get are just words. Another correspondent, same newspaper, 3 articles on a human tragedy. And it says, Michael Hornsby from Dhaka. He's more sympathetic because he's right there on the spot. So far, the only international response to the Bangladesh government's appeal for help has been a trifling contribution of $20,000 US, of course, from the United Nations Disaster Relief Office in Dhaka and an aircraft load of supplies from Britain. Anywhere between 60 million, I don't know, 60, 70 million. They haven't taken a census for some time. There's been a war. Many have died, but definitely not less than 55 million people. 70,000 square miles. And the ending is Michael Hornsby from Dhaka. There is probably also a feeling that the floods do not represent a compelling case for a special international relief effort, inasmuch as they are an annual phenomenon with which Bangladesh must learn to cope with its own resources if it is to be a viable country. If it is to be a viable country, this is an annual phenomenon, you cope. Well, there's a moral in all this for us, isn't there? If we don't cope with our problems, that's the sympathy we'll get. And even as we are coping with our problems, do you know the rumors that go out? Singapore is not viable. Mind you, it's a honk. You know, I don't blame them. They try. No hinterland, no oil. Viability, as you have seen, 70,000 square miles, 55 million people. And the conclusion Michael Hornsby from Dhaka writes is, must learn to cope with its own resources if it is to be viable. And I think that's the first lesson. We learn to cope with our problems. The acid test is whether at the end of the day we have solved our problems. You can multiply Singapore 10 times over, but you multiply the population 15 times over, and I say we are worse off than we were. We are now. We have given to us this small island, but a very valuable piece of real estate, the most valuable per square meter. We are going metric now, so per square meter, anywhere in this part of the world. And it's because of the infrastructure, its position, its infrastructure, and its people. That's the biggest human resource that we can have ever asked for. Willing to try, willing to work, willing to make that extra effort. And it does not matter if people spread rumors and say, you know, it's utter and complete madness, some of these rumors. But when I had a meeting with the press recently to go through the figures with them, and they asked me at the end of it all, you know, quite anxiously, says, tomorrow, National Day speech, are you really going to resign? You're going to announce your resignation? You've heard the others. I'm not wanting to be a rumor monger, but this has gone too far around. You might as well, if you haven't heard it, well, you'll hear it. A big split in the cabinet. Big row between Dr. Goh and me. I stand in the way of re-merger. Singapore is not viable. all the time. The direction is your confidence. That's the target. Your morale, your confidence. If they shake that morale, that confidence, I'm glad to know that they believe that if I'm going to resign, that will shake confidence. It's a great compliment to me. In which case I shall disappoint them, and I intend to stay and see my job through. But we have other problems.